Welcome to the latest Seahawks Draft Blog live stream. Rob, Robbie, and Adam here. Adam, you did not get a chance to see the Cleveland Browns game. I did. Robbie, did you get a chance to catch up with the game yesterday?
I did. Yeah, I didn't get the whole thing, but I watched the majority of it.
Yeah, well, we were just saying off air that the game seemed to last forever.
Yeah.
It did go on for an awful long time, and it kicked off at 3 o'clock in the morning here in England. And I managed to watch the whole thing all the way through because I am jet lagged. And it was not a problem at all. And then I slept all the way through until about mid-afternoon today. And it's no good for the jet lag, but I did get to see the game in all its glory. So, look, Robbie, there were some good things to start with. You know, like the number one defense had a very good stop to start the game and looked really sharp, looked very intense and active, everything you wanted to see there. The offense came out, were very aggressive, threw the ball with aggression, attacked the Browns, scored a touchdown very quickly. All of the starters were hooked at that point. There were some like personal positives, weren't there? Like there was the odd player who played very well after that. And there were some big play moments that really highlighted the game. But there were also like it was very clear that Mike McDonald hated every second of the third quarter where Seattle were very sloppy. So what was your sort of overall takeaway of that game? How preseason has gone, how the Seahawks are looking going into the new season?
Yeah, I mean, I got to be honest with you. I think we're going to see Ryan Grubb for about 2 years before he's gone up into a head coaching position. I think this is going to be, I think, probably the best looking offense that we've seen here in Seattle in a long, long time. I have a feeling that it's going to be very, very different than what we're used to. I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting to see. That's kind of how I'm feeling about it. But I mean, I'm more amped up for this season than I have been in quite some time. And I think that's just a testament to the new regime and everything that's going on. And I'm excited just to watch Seahawks football again and be like excited instead of kind of just the same old thing. You know, I always root for them, always excited, but it just feels different this year.
Yeah, I'm definitely in that same boat, Robbie. And somebody, I think, posted a comment a few days ago accusing us of like wanting the Seahawks to lose in the past, and that nothing could be further from the truth. It was never about wanting the Seahawks to lose to win an argument. It was just a feeling of where are we going here? You know, what exactly is the direction of the franchise, and not wanting to follow a team that was never bad enough to force change, but never be good enough to feel like they were actually ever going to win the Super Bowl again or even contend for that. And it did feel, I think, to us three and to many others, as if the Seahawks just got to a point where they were never going to, under Carroll, get back to the top. And although it's not going to happen in 2024, probably, it does feel as if the Seahawks are back on a pathway that could enable them to get there in the future. But there are some things that need to be fixed between now and that actually happening. But Adam, I think that, you know, obviously you've not seen the game yesterday, but what I do think about the NFL at the moment is that aside from the obvious top team, the Chiefs, it does feel like there's a lot of teams that are kind of similarly placed. I don't watch the Bills, for example. I actually caught quite a lot of the Bills' final preseason game, and admittedly, again, it's not starters. But I kind of feel like the Bills are very, very much in the same place the Seahawks were at post LOB, in that they have a quarterback who they rely on completely. And aside from that, they don't have a great depth of roster around them. And I think there are certain teams that either don't have the elite quarterback but have decent rosters, or there are teams that rely on the quarterback. But there aren't many complete teams. There might only be 2 or 3. And for that reason, it might mean that this is quite an even competitive NFL. And I think that is an NFL that the Seahawks this year can make some noise in, even if they're not a legit contender.
Yeah, I mean, even the Chiefs have been talking about how like Travis Kelce might have to be managed through the season in order to, you know, make him nice and fresh to come out in the playoffs when, I guess, in their opinion, the real games start. And I suppose they've got every right to think that after the success they've had in the last 5 years. But it feels like this preseason's been the hardest yet to get a feel on any team, because it just feels like teams are treating it with more and more disdain's probably not the right word, but can we just get to the end of preseason and then we can start worrying about the actual season? Like even listening to the like around the NFL podcast where they're doing it, they go around the NFC and around the AFC. There's not many teams that you listen to being analyzed by the kind of the 30,000 feet guys, not the beat reporters, but the guys that are looking at everyone. And it doesn't feel like anyone's looking at a team saying, blimey, watch out for them. They've got, this could be their year. It just doesn't feel like anyone's coming into the season so hot that you would look at that game and just immediately put a cross next to it. So it's going to be interesting, I think, as the cuts happen and, we get down to the 53-man rosters instead of the 763 that we've been going through in the last few weeks. Because, we all know the ins and outs of Seattle, but you look at the Packers beating the Ravens 30-7 last night, and the Ravens was a historically great season, team in preseason. So you think, wow, the Packers must be up to something, but they're obviously going to have holes. So it just feels like this. I've heard the preseason described as a Civil War reenactment, and it does feel a bit like that, but more so this season than any others, where it has felt like a much more of an like an annoyance and a hindrance to teams than a benefit.
Yeah, I'd definitely go along with that. There's been that vibe about it, and given there's even increasing talk of going to an 18-game season, I'd just love to see them do away with the preseason. Go to the 18th game if you need to, get rid of the preseason, and they don't have preseason games in college. They just get on with it. So the scrimmages are enough, and you just wonder, like, the team scrimmages, going and doing the joint practice that the Seahawks have done with the Titans this year. It seems like most teams do that now. Is suffice. You don't need the preseason games. I can live without seeing what we saw last night, which was Uchenna and Wosu getting blocked low down by a running back and potentially picking up a knee injury. You don't need to see that. That stuff that kind of thing does not happen on a practice field. It only happens in a game. So I'm happy to do away with preseason. I think most people would be. It's crap football. The game lasted forever last night. It was high scoring, but it wasn't particularly entertaining after half time. I remember it got to half time and I was thinking, we've all seen enough. Like, I bet if you'd have offered both head coaches at that point, do you need a second half here? They probably would have gone, no. And I would have lived with that. Our second half, I think most of the people in the stadium would have lived with that. We'd seen enough. We'd been entertained enough in that first half. It was fine. If people want to join in, whether that's with a question or if you just want to make a comment or if you just want to support the channel, send a super chat in. We will come to those. We are going to talk a bit about players that maybe we'd like to see remain on the roster, because we've already had a talk about Jamie Sheriff. Had a big game last night, Robbie. We can perhaps get on to him and what the Seahawks are going to do, given they've traded away Daryl Taylor. They've made a few moves this week. So there are a few things to get into. However, I want to start with this just to get it out of the way, just to sort of get onto this and then move on from it. Robbie, I did have a head in hands moment very early in the preseason game yesterday, because Geno Smith comes out. He has a really good first drive. It's very aggressive. Good throw to Jackson Smith-Njigba. Good throw to the running back on a play that extended. Good throw to DK Metcalf for a touchdown. Job done. Take a seat, Geno. There's nothing else to see here. He is undoubtedly better than Sam Howell. I mean, when Sam Howell came on, there was a noticeable difference I felt, between the two quarterbacks. There is no competition here. There never has been a competition this offseason. It has been Geno Smith all of the way. That said, I logged on to Twitter and I saw one or two people. Brian, and listen, I would have this conversation with Brian if he was with us today or if I was on one of his streams. He brought up the prospect of, I think it was more of a tongue-in-cheek thing than a serious remark about, are the Seahawks absolutely sure they don't want to extend Geno before the season? I really hope, Robbie, this isn't going to become a thing. And I know there's 2 weeks of the season. I hope it doesn't become a thing if Geno has a good week one against a Denver team that I fully expect the Seahawks to easily defeat. Here's the reality of the situation. Geno Smith was a free agent in 2023. So, what about 16 months ago? And he signed the deal that he has now. And then what he did in 2023, in the season last season, wasn't even good enough to hit all of the escalators to boost his contract. He didn't hit any of them. So he didn't even hit the escalators for last season. So therefore, he definitely didn't do enough to justify suddenly being given a $50 million contract. So if we're saying he didn't even hit the escalators last year, But now we think he should get a raise up to, let's say, plus 50 million a year based on camp and one series, which is all he did in the preseason against the Browns team minus Myles Garrett. That's just ridiculous. We don't need to go down this road. Geno Smith is contracted next year. It's not that he's out of contract at the end of this season. If he was out of contract at the end of this season, you might be able to make a case for they should re-sign him. But a year ago, he signed a deal. He signed this deal. Nothing has changed with his performance since then to warrant a year earlier getting an extension. And this would be the worst time for the Seahawks to go down that route because of all of the deals that the likes of Tua and Jordan Love and Trevor Lawrence and Jared Goff have signed. There's no reason to do it. If he plays really well this year, the Seahawks got a bargain next year. And if Geno Smith wants to go to the negotiating table next year off the back of a great season, I'm sure the Seahawks would oblige him. But they're not going to do that now, are they? Right now, he needs to go out and prove it. Not in a series against the Browns in preseason. He needs to go and prove it over 17 games. This isn't the time for a negotiation, Robert. And it feels like a massive red herring. To me, it feels about as worth discussing as whether or not the Seahawks should trade 2 first-round picks to bring Jamal Adams back. Like, it just seems like it's not a conversation for now. This is a conversation extending Geno Smith for next offseason, and it needs to wait until next offseason. But I know that there always has to be something with Seahawks fans. There has to be a conversation like this. And I'm a little bit fearful, Robbie, that the minute that Geno Smith has a good passage of play during this season, that we're going to be endlessly talking about extensions when it's so premature. That's for next offseason.
Well, it's funny that you bring this up because we chat on we message back and forth, the three of us, and and Adam brought it up and talking about, like, is this real? Like, is this conversation that people are actually talking about? And I was just like, I can't believe people are actually talking about this right now. Like, you have the opportunity next year to do it if you really wanted to, but 30, 35, 36 years old. I mean, I don't understand. People are so fascinated with the idea of, like, we have the quarterback of the future in this, and they don't want to, like, think about that. We don't, like, we're done. We're not to look or anything like that, or like, this is a guy. And listen, Geno may came out and play phenomenal in Ryan Grubb's offense, and if he does, fine, great, good. I mean, that would be the ideal. Like, the ideal situation would be Geno Smith comes out and just balls out, and we go deep into the playoffs, and and proves us wrong. I don't see it. Just because that could be wrong, but I don't see that being the case. I don't think there's any reason to be talking about extension right now. None whatsoever. Wait to see how it plays out. He may play great the first half of the season. He did 2 years ago, and then it tapered off. So maybe that happens again. I want to wait, kind of temper those expectations right now, because again, I just said it earlier, and I'm kind of going against what I just said, but, like, people may figure out Ryan Grubb's offense and then start slowing him down, right? I mean, that could happen as well. So I don't know. It's too early to talk about any sort of extension.
Well, if they extended him now, let's say they just imagine a fancy scenario where all of a sudden they've agreed a $50 million a year contract with Geno Smith, and I tax on, let's say, an extra 2 years. What happens then if he starts the season not very well? I mean, it would just look like an absolute catastrophe. Like, it would just be one of the stupidest moves that the franchise has ever made to extend him now. Like, at the very least, you wait until, I don't know, 15 games in, 12 games in, or whatever. And then if he has played so fantastically amazing that, yes, he is the guy. But even then, I would argue you have to wait for the playoffs. The whole point of this would be to say, okay, even if he has a great regular season, but then does nothing in the playoffs, you'd still be thinking, well, do we really want to commit $50 million a year? Do we want to keep him on the contract he's on for next season and just play this out? And he is in a different situation to Tua. It's not his second contract after being taken 5th overall. He's in a different place to Jordan Love, who was a first rounder, who's had a breakout season, who's young. The Packers and those teams are investing in the future and what they hope that those players will be developing to. If the Seahawks pay Geno Smith, they're paying someone who is, as you say, Robbie, going to be 35 next year, who's going to be 36 in 2026. Is at the back end of his career. That fall off that can always happen to a player at any time as soon as they go from mid-30s to 40. that can happen at any point. You don't want to be on the hook for a massive contract unless you really have to be. This has been a contract that has always been year to year with Geno Smith. And I think you wait until the end of the season. And if Geno Smith has a fantastic regular season, let's say leads the Seahawks to a really good playoff win or two, then he'd be in a great position next offseason to say, I want to extend my contract. But if he has another season like last season and the season before, where it's half the season's good, but half the season's not very good, you are not going to make him a $50 million a year quarterback because of that. And I just think that has to be acknowledged, doesn't it, Adam? I mean, I don't know what the rush is. Like, the Seahawks have actually done a good thing here. They've got a quarterback at what might be considered quite a value rate. They should benefit from that now. Why the rush to have him given some silly title like bona fide franchise quarterback and therefore needs to be paid that way? Like, why do the team need to do anything at this point? Why do fans feel they need to do anything? They don't.
Yeah, the fans wanting it is almost the most confusing part, because as a fan, surely you should want your team to have the best players earning as little money as possible, as unromantic as that is. Like, why wouldn't you want your team to have the advantage? It just, like, if they want to pay Geno $50 million after he performs like a $50 million quarterback, fine, do it. But it just seems really premature to be thinking, well, just in case he's amazing, we should pay him in case he's amazing. And what we'll also do is extend the contract for 2 or 3 years so that, well, if he's not amazing, we're stuck with it. Like, this is a dream scenario for the team to be in for 1 year. And I don't really understand the point of extending it now. I'm pretty draconian when it comes to all quarterbacks. And, when I see, the thing that I never understand is, like, well, Dallas, look, if they don't pay Dak Prescott $60 million a year, well, what are they going to do? They're not going to have Dak Prescott. Well, I'd be like, yeah, fine. And I feel the same about Kirk Cousins and Trevor Lawrence and even like Lamar Jackson. I feel the same way about that. And if all the teams had the same attitude, whereby you would only pay the elite guys $50 million plus a year, well, then water would find its level, and Dallas would get Dak Prescott for $30 million because the market just wouldn't be there. I just feel we're in this escalating quarterback market that doesn't really make any sense, because no one's playing to these contracts they've been given, like the Tua contract. I just don't understand why you would give him that much money before you see it. We've got Geno under contract for 2 more years. He's not going to hold out this year because he's, the whole players have no benefit to holding out now. They don't get the accrued year. They have to pay money back ultimately to do it. Just embrace the fact the Seahawks have maybe got a half decent deal. And if we haven't, like, I don't even think Geno can outplay the Seahawks value this year. If Geno takes them to the Super Bowl and we win it, well, the Seahawks will just pay him next year, and that's fine. He can't even outplay what the team can afford. None of it makes sense. And I came to you guys almost asking for clarity, I think, saying, am I reading this right? Because it just doesn't, I don't understand why it's even a conversation. And I've read all the pieces and I've listened to Brian and his guys and all the guys that are talking about it, but I just genuinely don't understand what any benefit would be to Seattle to doing it now.
Yeah, I agree. And, one or two people are asking, I think, because I do think this is a little bit confusing. I think some people think he has 1 year left on his deal because it's been talked about. He has 2 years left this year and next year. His cap breakdown, if you give me 2 seconds, I will dig it up on the spot track. His cap details for the next 2 years are that his cap hit this year is $26.4 million, and his cap hit next year is $38.5 million. So if he has an amazing year, I'm sure that next offseason they will talk contract, but there is no reason to do that now. He is not going to hold out or do any of those things because that would be crazy. I mean, like, he isn't going to hold out now, is he? With the week 1, 2 weeks away, that'd be career suicide, really, because the one team he wants to pay would be so put off by that, and so would every other suitor, presumably. So he has to play this year. He signed this contract. He agreed this deal when he was given the chance to test the open market a year ago. And if he doesn't like it, it's tough tit. And I think I think all of this stuff about, really it was generated from Puck had a chat with Mike Garofalo. Mike Garofalo mentioned that he'd gone to the Seahawks and or that his agent had, and just sort of brought up the subject of an extension. By all accounts, it didn't sound like it was going to go from there, that the Seahawks weren't really interested, that Geno Smith's camp weren't going to push it. I think the story since then has taken on a life of its own and has probably just been hyped up by fans and those was on the internet. And actually, it's a bit of a non-story. And I think if you actually spoke to Geno Smith about it and his people, they'd acknowledge that next year is the time. It's go and have a great year this year and then come to the table next year. And as I mentioned, he's a very different place to some of these other quarterbacks. He's not a young former first-round pick who is on his second contract. He is not. I mean, we all can say what we want about Jared Goff, but this is a quarterback who has played in a Super Bowl. This is a quarterback who really should have played in last year's Super Bowl. They should have beaten the Niners in the NFC Championship game, and he would have played in 2 Super Bowls. So that's one of the reasons why the Detroit Lions have decided to pay him. Geno Smith has no noticeable playoff history as a quarterback, and that's not all his fault. It's the teams he's played for, and including the Seahawks, have sort of had their role to play in that lack of playoff success. But it does feel as if he has to have a great regular season, make some noise as a quarterback in the playoffs, and then it'd be great for him to go to the negotiating table next year and talk about a pay rise and a small, modest extension for a player who hasn't got years and years to go. He may well play until he's 38, 39, 40. Not many people do that. And it may be more likely that he is essentially Seattle's Alex Smith, which is a great thing to have a player like that, which enables you to buy a bit of time to get to the next quarterback. Keep your comments coming in. I can see a lot of people in the chat. If you want to send a super chat and help support the channel, much appreciated. What I would say, Robbie, is I do think a good gauge for what the Seahawks can achieve this year is when you look at the Cleveland Browns that they played at the weekend and what they did last season. Last season, they won 11 games. They did that because of good coaching and star talent on defense, your Myles Garrett's, people like that. But they played last season with a bit of Deshaun Watson, a bit of PJ Walker, who we've seen in Seattle is not very good, a bit of Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and a bit of Joe Flacco. The Seahawks have got a better offensive structure than the Browns have in that regard. They don't have Myles Garrett, but I think the pass rushers in Seattle, Boya Mafe has shown well. Derek Cole really looks like he's come along. Byron Murphy looks like he's ready to have an impact. Leonard Williams looks good. Uchenna Nwosu, fingers crossed, is not going to have any serious injury from what happened yesterday. I look at the Browns last year, Robbie, and think if the Seahawks can be tough, physical, use them almost as a role model for this season, there's no reason why the Seahawks can't have a 10, 11 win season and go into the playoffs thinking we can take people on, we can have a go. I know the Browns got blown out by the Texans in the first round of the playoffs, but that was a bit of a freaky, unexpected result, and fair play to the Texans for a great performance. But I think that if the Seahawks can get to where the Browns are, it will at least have them trending in the right direction for the future.
No, I totally agree. I think, like I said, could be one of the best offenses we've had in a long time, and it's going to be fun to watch and see how creative they get. And then Mike McDonald and his defense. If we can have some of the production that he had in Baltimore, that's going to be a huge win. So yeah, I could see a scenario, especially if you look at our schedule. I could see us like the first few weeks really going to set us up for a success. So. I'm really looking forward to getting some of the more challenging, playing Detroit and, but even last year we went in Detroit and beat them, and, playing San Francisco and testing our skills there. I'm just excited to see, kind of what we can do, but I think you're right. There's no reason why we can't win 10, 11 games, maybe even more.
Yeah, I'd go along with that. And when you look at the schedule, so they're going to start against Bo Nix and the Broncos. And look, at the first weekend of the NFL season, Adam, is always a bit unpredictable. You tend to have games that are low scoring. both teams tend to have teething problems. It can be a very different experience when you play a team like Denver and Bo Nix as a rookie in week 3 than it can be week 1. I still expect the Seahawks to win that game somewhat handsomely. Bo Nix to me is a fairly unimpressive quarterback. He's going to dump stuff off. He's going to do what Sean Payton tells him to do. I don't. If he is going to be a success in Denver, I don't think it's going to happen straight away, very early in his career, in his first season. So I think it's a good time to play him. And then they get to go and play the Patriots and potentially Drake May, because it seems as if he is going to start somewhat quickly as well in New England and could start the season. And that would be a great opportunity to just do the same thing again, to give a rookie absolute nightmares in week 2. And, anytime you can start 2-0 and just assume that they're going to win both of those games. But if they can do, that gives you the platform. It gives you a bit of a margin for error in that first month of the season when you then go and play the Dolphins in Seattle week 3. And that will be a tough game because the Dolphins come into Seattle on the 22nd of September versus coming in December when it's cold and they don't fancy it like the Dolphins tend to do would be a different proposition. And then you've got to go and play the Lions, who they've played well against, but that was under a different staff. So we don't know how the Seahawks are going to get on against the Lions on the 1st of October. And then you get to play the Giants after that, which is a winnable game. And then you get to host the Niners. So in those sort of first 6 games, there's a mix of very winnable opportunities there, Adam, and good tests, good challenges to see what this team's really capable of.
Yeah, I think we've been quite keen not to impress hard targets on this season. Like, let's see what we've got. When we do our end of season show, what's our mood going to be like? Because it's been as down in the dumps as you could really wish any podcast to not be the last 2 or 3 years. And I think if we go into a summer, into an off season with the actual, this feels like 2012 kind of spirit that they've pretended has been there for the last 2 or 3 years, I think we'll all be quite pleased. But something that I think that will be quite a good indicator is the Seahawks have been horrific at letting donkey quarterbacks hang about in their own building. Like Darnold and Mason Rudolph and Colt McCoy of yesteryear. And I think Derek Carr or whoever the Raiders quarterback was when they came in.
Austin Davis beat the LOB.
Yeah, I mean, just absolute mugs just coming in and hanging about in our building. And I do think that's the kind of thing that if you're looking at the McDonald era and saying, right, that's a difference, like go and batter Bo Nix. Like maybe he can have one drive, but make it, 17-7 halfway through the second quarter and then go and win by 13, 14 points. For me, that's the kind of barometer that I'm looking at, that when I'm judging the season at the end, well, what have the Seahawks done better this year that they've really struggled to do? And blowing out bum quarterbacks is really one that I'm looking out for, because I certainly feel that with a true defensive mastermind that we hope that we've got versus a fading one that we unfortunately had for the last few years, that for me is going to be a big thing that I'm looking out for.
Very much so. And, again, I don't want to go over old ground too much, Robbie, but when I was listening to Pete Carroll on KJR this week, I know that there was a lot of people whose reaction to that was like, oh, it's great to hear from Pete. And
how old did he sound?
Yeah, great to have him back at USC. And, I'll always like Pete. And all I could think of was, thank God they made the change. Like, it made me shudder. It's football. Who cares? He's a coach who's moved on. It's no skin off my nose. It's life. Coaches change. But I was just so relieved, Robbie, that the Seahawks had done this. I don't think I could have dealt with another season of the status quo, another season like the last few, another season like Adam says, where you wouldn't bet against Bo Nix having a good day and then finding a wrinkle to exploit, like something like they're in the run or like one pass that they could just keep going to. I mean, when you saw every team come into Seattle, like it says Mason Rudolph and Sam Howell came in at a big game in Seattle. And, all of these teams that were coming and either running it or throwing it against the Seahawks defense, I couldn't do that. And now there's just at least a hope that with Grobe on the offense and McDonald and Dirty and Leslie Frazier on the defense, that they might be able to create something to ask some questions that I'm looking forward to seeing the exotic blitzing that they're going to use against Bo Nix. And I half expect it all to work as well, Robbie, and to actually give him I'm thinking I could imagine a 3 interception game, like a pick 6 being amongst the 3. I can imagine 6 sacks. And I can imagine it not just being some wacky one-off like it was when the Seahawks beat the Giants on Monday Night Football last year. Like they could do this against Drake May the following week after. And I genuinely believe at some point this year, because there's just a real new, you've got a first-time head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and special teams coordinator. There is going to be a game this year that they lose, and we're going to do a stream right after the game, and we're going to go, I can't believe they've lost that. I can't believe they've lost to this team, and I'm really annoyed by it. But I also think they'll beat San Francisco in San Francisco, or I don't know, tell me somebody else they're playing who's really good, later on, and they'll beat them, and we'll go, wow, that was a really impressive win. Carroll would not have won that game. I think it's going to be that kind of season, and I think it's going to be more interesting for it. And for that, exactly like you, cannot wait for week one. Cannot wait for week one, as opposed to sort of almost anticipating a ranty stream being the highlight of week one instead.
Yeah, just to comment on the Pete Carroll thing. Yeah, I'm super happy that we finally moved on. Again, I no ill will towards Pete. Loved Pete while he was here. It got stale, the last few years, and it was just too much to handle, and it didn't feel like a lot of change was happening. So, I didn't get to hear him on KJR, but hope he goes back to SC and does well. I hope wherever he goes, he does well. But I just think like for us as Seahawks fans, this is a good time for us to be around. We got the benefits of Pete while he was here, and now it's tended to have a new era. And like I said, I think a couple podcasts ago, I want us to be excited about something other than like wanting to rehash what we already had. Like I want a new identity and things, like already seeing, like just watching the game and watching what Grubb's going to do on offense. That's something completely different than I think we've seen. Other than maybe that first week when we had, now I already forgot his name. He came in, who was the last offensive coordinator for Pete?
Shane Waldron.
Yeah, when we first got Shane Waldron from the Rams, his first game against the Colts, he came out and it looked just different, right? And it was like really exciting. And then it just got watered down, and nothing.
Literally
changed.
The next week later, it was back to the old
back
offense.
to the old offense. So that was really frustrating. And but that first week, I remember just thinking, dang, we haven't seen this, and that's exciting. And then that's kind of how I'm feeling about having like Ryan Grubb this year. Like I feel like maybe this is going to be something we haven't seen in a while.
I agree, and I quite like the fact that I people have mentioned to us who've been around Grubb is that he can actually he's not for everybody. Like he probably will butt heads with people, but I like that. I feel like there's a bit more of an edge. I think there's a bit more of an edge to McDonald. I think he does a passable job, like being amenable to the media. But if you listen to his press conference yesterday, he doesn't say anything. Like, what do you think of Daryl Taylor? I don't want to talk about it. Like, he's basically like one step up from Bill Belichick when it comes to his press conferences. He doesn't talk about injuries. He don't want to talk about the trade. He don't want to praise players because he doesn't want it to get to their heads. He basically says nothing, but he does it with a kind of, I just get the sense that behind the scenes, there is a bit of an edge to him. And it's just that you don't, it's just a bit of a performance. It's just like, I'm going to get in and out of this press conference, then get back to it. And I like that about it. I just think everything about it just seems a bit hardened and a bit more, I don't know, like a bit tougher and a bit more physical. Whereas I think the latter years of the Carroll era, we were soft. We were a finesse team. I think Carroll's head disappeared up his arse, quite frankly. I mean, like, look at this end of press conference. Amid all of the tears and the emotion, he was also telling John Schneider, good luck now that you're the one running the charge. You're soon going to find out how difficult it is. Like he was the only one who could run the Seahawks. Like it was just like, nah, come on, man. Just, you probably outstayed your welcome by about 5 years, like if not longer. So I'm just glad that it's different, relieved, excited. Chuck any other words you want in there.
Yeah, I mean, Rob, you speak to professional sports managers all the time. Robbie and I only have the benefit of just watching what they say into a microphone. But I do feel like I've seen enough interviews where you can kind of tell with a manager, a head coach or whatever, like what feels genuine or not. Like I've been following the Mariners a lot more this season, and like Scott Service, anytime he's on the radio or whatever, it just doesn't feel, it just feels like it's not real. And you can just feel like you're looking straight through it and thinking, nah, there's no substance to what you're saying. what I think about McDonald is, and you'll know much better than me because you're up close and personal with these guys in other sports, but it does feel like there's enough to back up what he's saying as legitimate. Like he can take me with him, I think, when it comes to this. I'm very much picking up what he's putting down whenever he speaks. And even if it's not saying much, there's enough there and enough substance behind it that it feels like I don't feel like I'm being BS'd from the podium, which it has felt like that for a little while. And it's always going to be, you know, when a manager or head coach is that for 10, 15 years, they do take on this sort of deity figure whereby the team is theirs more than they are part of the team. And it's inevitable that that's how the Pete thing kind of went. But with McDonald, young guy, first time, it would have been quite easy for a lot of people to see through him. And I don't feel that yet at all. I feel very much engaged with whatever he's saying, even when it's not necessarily on the face of it that profound or interesting.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think part of the problem with Carroll was that after X number of years consecutively of the defense becoming fairly abysmal towards the end of the year, he neither had any good answers to address that. He didn't find any answers either in terms of production or when he was interviewed. And the fact that he was not being asked and pressed on it sufficiently, because if he was not going to give the answers, you thought, well, someone's going to put him under the, you know, put him under a bit of pressure and ask some good questions about this. And that never happened. And it all contributed to a very frustrating thing. I get the sense that there's not going to be any kind of, you know, for want of a better word, bollocks taught if things go wrong, you know, with Mike Macdonald. I think he will just basically say what he thinks. I think he did yesterday when he spoke about the defensive performance being not good enough, even though they won quite an exciting preseason game, even if it was elongated. Before we get into the super chats, I did want to just mention, Robbie, Adam, you didn't see the game, so you will probably not have noticed this, but one of the big highlights of the game yesterday was Michael Bennett on co-commentary when Kenny McIntosh scored his run. There was a stiff arm from Kenny McIntosh, and as he was running down the sideline, all you could hear was Michael Bennett shouting, "A stiffy, a stiffy." And then he mentioned, as a defender, you never want to get the stiffy.
I've heard this.
The childish side of me was very, very much enjoying that at 3:45 in the morning, whenever it happened.
That was pretty funny. I like having Bennett on the sideline.
Yeah. Yep. I find that quite amusing. Anyway, we're going to get back to some of the personnel things and some players and stuff like that in a second. But got a few super chats. This from WA Fish Quest. Hope you had a great holiday. How was Alaska? It was fantastic. If you ever get a chance to go, obviously it's a bit easier for people living in Seattle to get over there. But I would fully recommend it. And we were very lucky with the weather, but amazing place. And so glad I had the chance to go and experience that. It was amazing. And thank you for the super chat. Hawks fan Matt Mann says, if the Seahawks went 9-8 and missed the playoffs again this year, but were 6-0 versus the NFC West, how would you rate the season? I mean, look, I think because they would have only won 3 games outside of the NFC West, I think it would, if you beat the Niners twice and the Rams twice, and even the Cardinals twice, that would mean that they'd dropped games. So they play the Broncos, Patriots, Giants are the first 3 of the first 6 games. So that's 3 other games, which means that they would lose to, if they won those 3, they would then lose to the Falcons, the Bills, the Jets, the Packers, the Bears, the Vikings. I think it'd be very disappointing if they lost to teams, that many teams. They play enough bad teams out of the division that if they win a clean sweep in the NFC West, but then drop a load of games against some crap other teams, that would probably feel quite frustrating. Are you kind of aligned with that, guys? Because I think it'd be great to beat the Niners twice and be amazing. But if you're capable of beating the Niners and the Rams and going 6-0 in a tough NFC West, but then don't even make the playoffs, having lost to, let's say, the Jets and teams like that, that's going to be really, I would think, frustrating. What do you think, Robbie?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It would be interesting to see what the teams, like you just lined up the ones that you had lost to and kind of like, and maybe in the manner in which you lost, like, was it just a close battle, silly mistakes? What was it? Like, could you chalk it up to, rookie head coach. Like what would the mistakes be? But going 6-0 in the NFC West is nothing to be ashamed of by any means. I'd be excited about beating the Niners and the Rams twice and the Cardinals.
Adam, what would your reaction to that be?
This might be not possible to answer just yet. Maybe someone in the chat that's got the schedule up. What's the worst record the Seahawks could have going into the last 6 games of the season if they won all 6 NFC West games?
The worst record.
If they could feasibly be 3-8 going into the last 6 games of the season with those parameters and then win the last 6 and be 9-8, then that would suggest to me they turned a corner after finding something that wasn't working earlier and they've got something to build on. So I'd probably be okay with it in that sense. But if it's a kind of, 2-1, 3-2, 4-5, 7-6, 9-8, that sort of season, then that probably wouldn't do it for me.
Well, the Seahawks play the Cardinals and the Rams in their final 6 games from inside the division. So they would,
so 4-7's the worst they could be.
And that would mean losing 2 out of the division. It would mean losing to the Bills, which wouldn't be any major thing. The Falcons, the Giants, the Lions, the Dolphins, the Patriots, and the Broncos. I mean, it would mean starting the season 0-4.
God, imagine the content.
Imagine the number of people
super chats
I knew they should have kept Carroll.
The super chats would be flying and we'd be in Maui on holiday, Rob. It'd be fantastic.
Oh dear. They wouldn't be flying in the abuse. The look. There is a very small.
It's your fault, Rob. It's your fault.
Yes, there is a small section of fans who they cannot. They just honestly, there's nothing more triggering than a conversation about Pete Carroll, and the idea that in any way, shape, or form he was not keeping things ticking along nicely. So I think that'd be horrendous, actually, Adam. But I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, look, let's bring the schedule up. Let's just do this. Let me get the schedule. I want to get it in a slightly different because I don't think on the Google thing, which is what I've been reading it off, is going to show up on the screen very, very well. So I've got it on ESPN. I'm going to bring it up here. Let's just have a go. Okay, let's be fair with it, but let's have a go at a realistic sort of prediction for this. Can I make this a bit bigger? Okay. So you guys can see that. Okay, now can you?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's nice and clear. So, are we all going to say the beat Denver?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the 1-0. I think New England are going to be right in the running for the first overall pick. So can we say 2-0?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually think they will beat the Miami Dolphins, but I think it will be an epic.
Yeah, I'll go with you on that.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And then I've got them losing to Detroit because, of course, after beating Detroit in Detroit for years and years and years under Pete Carroll, the minute that he goes, they're going to lose to the Detroit Lions, probably badly. I don't know. Just as we're all getting carried away at the Miami game, I can see them dropping that Detroit game. So, are we okay with going 3-1?
Yeah.
Sure.
4-1 because the Giants are crap.
Yeah.
Happy with that? And then what do you think about the Thursday night game? It says Friday there because obviously I'm in the UK. But
I think they dropped the next 2.
So we're going to say that they were
4-3.
3. So you see them losing to the Niners and the Falcons.
Yeah.
I think, Robbie, I'll let you I think they will probably, I could see them losing to the Niners in one, and then I think I could see them splitting this year.
Yeah, I think they win the one at home and lose the one away.
I'm gonna go with Adam because I don't want it to be just because if we keep going on this, they're going to win 14 games. So I'm gonna go with Adam that they lose. But can I convince you both that they beat? I have no confidence in Atlanta's staff. I have no confidence in a half healthy Kirk Cousins, and I don't think they have enough talent on their roster to do anything this year. and I fancy in a dome Seattle to go there and just blitz the shit out of Kirk Cousins and win that game. Can I convince either of you to go instead of 4-3, 5-2?
Yeah, I'll go along with you.
Yep.
Okay. So 5-2, but then I think.
See, I had them beating Buffalo at home.
Okay, well, I'm happy to go with that. I was going to say, oh, it's Buffalo, but I think at home, I think that could be another game where you're like, oh, they win and everybody gets a bit carried away afterwards, and then maybe they lose to the Rams the week after.
I'm down for that.
So 6-3 at the bye.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which seems, I think, reasonable. So we're going to say 6-3 at the bye. Niners, I know I said they might split, but that would mean winning this game. But then the Ravens won in San Francisco.
We can't have them 10-3, guys. Come on.
Well, this would be 7-3.
Yeah, but then look at the next three.
8-3, 9-3. Well, it could be 10-3 because they play Arizona twice. Should we say? I tell you what. Let's say that they lose to the Niners, and they lose both games. It's a year too soon. Let's say, but they keep it close. Let's say it's a close, hard-fought loss, a respectable loss. But then they beat the Arizona Cardinals to go to 7-4. The Jets to go 8-4. What about the Arizona return game?
Yeah, I reckon.
I mean, Arizona always plays us tough. I could see us dropping one to them.
I think they'll beat Arizona. I think if we're going to give them 2 losses to the Niners, we have to give them
2. Okay, that's fair.
Maybe 1:00 kickoff in New York against Rodgers. That defense could be quite good.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah,
could be. I still think we'd go with it. So we'll give them 9-4. Packers on that Sunday night football, isn't it? So that could be interesting.
At home, we're winning.
Okay. Do you agree?
Packers are my tip to make the Super Bowl.
Ooh.
So I don't agree.
Okay.
I just feel like they've got everything in place. The Packers, they have this knack of doing this. It just feels like things are looking quite good for them.
I'm going to go with Adam and say that I think they have to lose a game at some point that is somewhat deflating. So that's 9-5, isn't it?
Yeah.
Vikings at home, I don't expect them to win.
Yeah, that's a win.
10-5. Chicago could go either way because I think, obviously Shane Waldron. But I think there was also an unpredictability to Chicago. And if it was at home, I would say home banker. But on the road, I don't know. But I think we will win.
That's going to be cold, man. Chicago in December.
It will be cold. But we've got a new physical defense, Robbie.
That's true.
So I'm going to go for a win there, but then maybe drop in the Rams game.
What a lovely little Boxing Day night treat that is for us, Rob.
Oh, yeah.
Finish off the last of your cheese and roast beef or whatever it is. That'd be lovely, that Chicago game.
I can remember on Christmas night one night, sat in my front room, watching the Steelers play somebody on Christmas Day, like early hours of the morning, hearing something happening outside, thinking, oh, what's that? But I was a few drinks in, so I had nothing of it. And then a bit more of a commotion outside. I'm thinking, what is that? And then a knock on the door, and I'm thinking, it's Christmas Day. Like it's 1 a.m, Boxing Day at this point. Open the first door to the porch and see fluorescent.
Santa.
Well, I see fluorescent. I'm thinking it's the police, and at this point I'm absolutely shitting myself. Open the door, and the policeman goes, "Oh, someone just tried to steal your car, mate." I was just like, "Oh, for God's sake!" And now every time I get to those Christmas games, I'm always kind of like on edge. Like if I hear anything outside, I'm like, "Someone after my car," So that's probably what that Chicago game is going to be like for me. And that there's always a chance that's going to move, isn't there? Because they can move those games. Or is that a Thursday night game?
It's Thursday, yeah.
So it probably won't move. Okay. So I've got them winning 11 games, 11-6.
You've got them beating the Rams then?
No, I've
Is that
got them
right?
beating the Bears and losing
Okay.
to the Rams, or do it the other way around. Have them losing to the Bears, the upstart Bears. Let's say Caleb Williams really shines, and then they beat the Rams, and the rest is history. Are you down with that, or do you want them to lose both last games? Because then they would be 10-7. But I think 11-6 is okay.
It's not a tricky roadmap to lay out either way, though, is it? For a positive season.
And I think you could say 10 or 11 wins. This is why I would lump on any side that's giving you plus 7.5 wins for the Seahawks. I mean, that to me is crazy. I mean, you could, to get to 8 wins, they'd only have to beat, let's say, Denver, New England, New York, Arizona, Minnesota,
And then
the
find
Jets.
2 from somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, it's not. I think that's so. We've decided the Seahawks are going to have a great season.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Excellent. That's good to know. Okay, let's crack on with the super chats. Peter says we were in it till the end. Just need to clean some things up. Guys are fighting out there. Oh, that's a Pete Carroll quote, obviously. That is, the old. I really hope Mike McDonald doesn't drop something like this after a crap loss at some point, because it's going to be like, oh no, flashbacks. We just need to clean some things up. Oh yes, Peter. Any concerns if Nwosu misses significant time? It's hard to tell, Robbie, because he walked off the field, but when he got hit, he looked really hurt, didn't he?
Yeah.
He looked really like he was, on the floor for a while. He got up and seemed okay, but then went off, and then he mentioned it was a knee injury after the game.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that maybe someone would have reported it by now if he was going to miss significant time, like a Schefter or somebody like that.
Yeah, I just literally something popped up from the Seahawks on my phone. Said Nwosu and Burns exited the preseason finale. Updates won't come until Monday at the earliest.
Okay. It's a concern,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's. I think Maffei and Hall have played sufficiently well enough. If it meant he missed a couple of weeks. Appreciate the super chat there. And Chris has just chucked in 699. No comment there. Keep those coming if you want to support the channel, if you've got a point that you wanted to make. In terms of players, Robbie, that there doesn't seem to be, there's not that much, in terms of who's going to make it. There's no big question marks, I don't think. People have been talking about Jamie Sheriff making the roster. But at the same time, I don't know if you've heard Mike McDonald after the game. He pretty much said, we've said to a lot of, he was asked specifically about Sheriff, and he says, there are going to be players who don't make it, and for them, we've told them just to keep going. And I do wonder if they'll just let him go to the practice squad. I'm not sure if anyone will pick him up. And then what they can do, obviously, is elevate that player for, I think it's 3 weeks, isn't it? And if Nwosu can't play in the first game or the first few games, they could elevate Sheriff to fill that role, and that might be what they do. But maybe if they hear any intel that he's going to get picked up, maybe they will stash him. We'll have to see there. I think it's clear that Laviska Shenault is going to make the team because of his guaranteed contract. And if you saw the block he made on the Kenny McIntosh touchdown run, stuff like that's just is manna from heaven from a coach. So they'll pick him for that, and he will have a kicking responsibilities, you would imagine. I think D. Eskridge is going to be an interesting one because obviously he got the punt return and he can do a bit more. Like D. Williams is the other guy that people have been talking about, but D. Williams can't do anything. Like they played him at cornerback at the end of the game and he gave up the touchdown right at the end. Like if he can't do anything other than kick return, how do you justify keeping him on the roster unless he's Devin Hester? And he isn't. So I think that at least with Eskridge, you could say, oh, he could be a receiver, or they could have a package of plays for him as a receiver and he's a threat. So I think that Eskridge is more likely than Williams, although they might both get cut. But the fact you have to have 2 kick returners on the field for every kick return, I think one of them will make it, and I think it probably will be Eskridge. I think George Alani and Kenny McIntosh are nailed on to make it as the 2 backup running backs. Is there anybody else, Robbie, that you're sort of thinking, I'd like to see him make it or whatever? Because I'm assuming that, your Brady Russell's definitely going to make it. Jake Bobo's definitely going to make it. There's not there's no real question marks there. So is it pretty much there as far as you concerned?
Yeah, I mean, you just said the name that I had in my mind, Brady Russell. I think he would make it. I don't think there's any concern about that at all. But I'd like to see him, make the squad, and I think he played really, really well. And most of the people that you're referring to, I think they're all going to make it. I don't think there's going to be really any surprises.
No, I don't think so. What did you make of the Daryl Taylor trade, Adam?
I kind of treat it like we got a 6th round pick in return, therefore not something that anyone should be burning too many calories thinking and talking about. But, as with all things Seattle, people seem to get very het up about it. Like, you either trust the new regime or you don't, right? I mean, how likely is it that we're going to be mourning the loss of Daryl Taylor at any point? My best mate is called Daryl Taylor. That's probably the biggest loss that I now no longer have a Seahawk player with the same name as my best mate from Epping Forest in Essex, who, does not look like Daryl Taylor in any way, shape, or form. So that's always quite funny. But that was basically the most, that and the late hit on Jared Goff on play action when he actually handed the ball off. There's probably the only 2 things I really think about when I think about Daryl Taylor.
Adam, does your mate? I mean, when I think of people from Essex now, I kind of just have the image of the guy who runs a stall and has a Sunday dinner for breakfast every day. Like,
no, he's Tottenham Essex, not West Ham Essex.
Oh, right. Okay. Right. Okay.
Big difference. Big difference. Speaking of footballers, though, Jamie Sheriff is surely a QPR player. You can't tell me he's actually a Seahawk player. I'm not having it.
This is great banter for anybody who likes English soccer, because I get that. But Robbie's wondering what the hell we're on about. What's a QPR?
I don't even know what the hell you guys are talking about. That's whatever the hell you guys are talking about. I was out.
Yeah. I think the funniest thing, I've had a bit of fun with the Daryl Taylor thing, because I'm just amazed by the Bears fans' reaction. They really, there's quite a few of them responded to my video saying that he's just a tease of a player. He's somebody who can produce a great sack in a game and will ultimately, he'll probably get 6 or 7 sacks for the Bears if he plays enough reps. And it will always do just enough to keep you in just enough intrigue there to think that he could become something, but he never will, because he's basically got the brains of a biscuit, to be fair. This is the player who, Jared Goff handed the ball off, was preparing the huddle for the next snap, and then Daryl Taylor came flying in and knocked him so late. It was the latest hit I think I've ever seen in a football game, because Daryl Taylor just hadn't realised that the ball had gone somewhere else. And then who could ever forget the classic moment when he ran on the field in celebration, then started blocking downfield after a Quandre Diggs interception? I mean, it was quite amusing at the time, but didn't say much for the intelligence of Daryl Taylor to do that. Because if he'd have been spotted, it would have, Seahawks probably would have got a 15-yard penalty for that. And, not good against the run, not somebody you can rely on. I think Mike McDonald, they played him so much in the last game that it was a very clear, either let's try and hope he has a good game and we can get rid of him and sell him to somebody else, or this is your last chance, mate. And I've just not got the sense at any point during this offseason that Mike McDonald fancies Daryl Taylor. And John Schneider gave Daryl Taylor every chance to make it work under Mike McDonald, and it just hasn't. And they've just shuffled him out the door for a 6th rounder. But the Bears fans think they've got something great here, and they're trying to convince me, who's actually watched Daryl Taylor play, unlike them, that they've got the steal of the century here. Well, good luck, Bears fans, and also enjoy watching Shane Waldron's offense this year. And the other thing, Robbie, is a lot of people have been reacting to this, and some fans have been saying, "Oh, are they going to go and get Hassan Reddick now? And are they going to go?" But they don't need to do that, do they? They don't need to go and make a big splash on another pass rusher, because Derek Hall's looked good in preseason, and Boya Maffei's looked good, and they've got Nwosu, and if they need somebody else, they've got Sheriff, but they've got Draymond Jones that they're trying to off the edge anyway. And if there's one thing that Mike McDonald showed last year, is that you can get production out of guys. Jason Owe had a good year, his first good year in the league. Jadeveon Clowney was rejuvenated. Kyle Van Noy had a great year at the age of about 46. So, if they're going to bring somebody else in and to play as a fourth, I suspect it will either be Sheriff, who has shown he can be active and do something, or maybe they sign somebody in the next 10 days who gets cut, or somebody who's just sort of like an older player, who's maybe a bit of a journeyman, Robbie, who could come in on the cheap and do what Kyle Van Noy did. I don't think that there's going to be any big splash here, is there, for some, big name pass rusher? I don't think they need that.
Yeah, and I certainly hope they don't go trading draft capital, especially high draft capital for a player that, may get cut or just a big name player just because they need it. I don't think there's any need for that. And I'm quite excited to see some of these other guys, Derek Hall and such, get a little more playing time and see what we got in these guys and see how they're going to play. I'd rather that than go trade for someone who might not fit the system.
And I suppose, Adam, there is still a chance that the Seahawks could do something. If they were going to do anything, what would you like to see them do? Because I'm just having a look now at so they've got $10.6 million. I don't know if this includes Daryl Taylor's. If Curtis is on, he might be able to tell us, actually. I'm just having a look to see if Taylor's still on the over the cap. He's not. So it could be that they've taken that off and that they have 10.6 million in cap space. Of course, some of that has to be accounted for. I mean, look, there are teams with a lot more cap space. Like the Niners, somehow have managed to get $52 million in cap space. The Seahawks are near the bottom of the list of available cap space, so they can't do that much. Some people have been saying, I should go and get Ernest Jones. I don't think the Rams are going to be gift wrapping the Seahawks Ernest Jones anytime soon, who apparently is available for trade, and that'd be costly for a linebacker. And we've been there, done that. We've done the whole spending lots on linebackers and safeties thing. Let's not go down there again. But is there anything that you could anticipate, or that anything that you'd like to see them do, or are you quite happy with where they are at the moment with the roster?
I think, given the expectations on, we're not necessarily trying or not aiming to win it all right this second, I think we're in a pretty good spot. I mean, there's obviously quite a few guys on 1 year earn it deals. You'd love another middle linebacker. Would you love another interior guard? Probably yes. But I think overall, and with Taylor, I'll never forget Dwight Freeney being signed off the scrap heap and getting 3 sacks. It just feels like one of those positions whereby if you need a guy, you'll get a guy for a couple of weeks and they'll do a job and you'll sack them off and that'll be fine. Like, if you can get anything for these fringe guys, just sort of take it at this stage, because you're not going to miss out on anything. And it's not like throwing a corner out there that's been on the couch for 8 weeks who doesn't know his arse from his elbow at that stage and is so close to being done he can't keep up. It just feels like that sort of position where if you've got the nous and the experience, you can kind of find a way to fill in where Daryl Taylor would otherwise have filled in for the team.
No, I agree with that. I'm trying to see if there's anybody. I'm trying to find a good list of remaining free agents that are. I'm kind of just looking down the list now.
Obviously, one superstar special teamer that the team simply must be re-signing at some point soon, but who knows?
Of course. Although apparently he turned down the Commanders last week.
Perhaps.
Old Dan Quinn was trying to get him back there. I mean, there are someone like, for example, Randy Gregory's still out there. Didn't they have him in? I think they had him in for like a visit or a workout, didn't they, or something? I'm sure they had him in a few months ago.
Yeah, he was there last year in some capacity, wasn't he?
I just get the sense that Randy Gregory at some point this year had a visit with the Seahawks or was either being linked to the Seahawks. And at least according to this list that I'm looking at now, I don't know, maybe somebody did sign him. But if you wanted somebody who could just, no, he is still a free agent. If you just wanted somebody who could come in and make up, another spot, then I suppose he could theoretically do that. Yannick Ngakoue is still out there, but how much is he going to cost? And to me, he feels like very much like Daryl Taylor, quite frankly. You just be replacing one for the other, and is he going to be cheaper? I don't know. Apart from that, there's not too many players out there, and I think it is about a process, isn't it? They are going to have to address some needs next year, Robbie, and doing the draft prep that I have over the last few weeks, looking at this draft class, actually interior offensive line could end up being one of the strengths of round one, because I've actually started my draft board even earlier this year, and I've started to put players in. And this has to change because obviously they're not played well. Florida State and Georgia Tech played a pretty crap game. I mean, it was entertaining at the end, but I thought the quality was poor overall. But the team's going to start playing games next weekend, and so 1, 2, 3 of the tackles that people are projecting to round one, I'm projecting at guard. So you've got a lot of players kicking inside, and you've got, I think Tyler Booker is unbelievable at Alabama, the left guard there. So there's going to be opportunities to sort of get players in there. And then there's the older, what do they do at quarterback, Robbie, which is going to be the ongoing topic. And I think whatever happened was Geno Smith this year, Robbie, I don't think we've seen enough from Sam Howell to think, yep, that's okay. He's the next one. I just don't think he's good enough for that, Robbie.
No, I agree. And I'm looking forward to you scouting a bunch of quarterbacks this year and getting it up on the blog so we can all read it.
Yeah, well, it's already started. But I would say I don't think there's unless certain players really elevate themselves this year, I don't think it's going to be an amazing class. Unless there's any of the late super chats, we'll wrap it up after this one last topic. So if there is a last question or a comment you want to make, send it in now. But it appears that Anthony Bradford has won the right guard job over Christian Haynes. And I just wonder how you feel about that, guys, because the third round was quite rich this year. It was a good-looking third round. And when I look at some of the players who were available in that range, I think it'll be a bit frustrating if the Seahawks end up with a backup right guard from that pick. And although it's too early to write Haynes off as a backup, and maybe in 2 weeks' time he'll have won the job, and it's just a process thing. He won't be the first rookie who doesn't start immediately. But I also think a lot of us expected that in a straight shootout with Anthony Bradford, that he would win that job. And the fact that they drafted a right guard in round 3 when there were left guards available made me think that they weren't that sold on Anthony Bradford. So, Adam, I mean, does it bother you at all?
It bothers me to this point where I don't think I'm a massive John Schneider fan anyway, and I think his position should be under much more scrutiny than it currently is. And I think if the team aren't good this year, McDonald should be safe, but Schneider should be at least on the hot seat for me. And I don't know if that's an outlandish thing to say. I don't know if other people agree, if you guys agree, but for me, like Pete Carroll and John Schneider were a package deal. And we had Michael Sean on our podcast a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about this, that, they sort of came together and they probably should have gone together, I think. And I'm still not completely sold on Schneider's drafting on the whole. It's been better, I suppose, last couple of years, but with Taylor leaving, there's no one from 2020 that got a second contract with Seattle. I don't know. And there's a comment there, John Schneider was stuck accepting Pete Carroll's recommendations. Like, I vehemently disagree with that. I think Schneider has been running the drafting and personnel side of this team, and the fact that it's not been that much different in the last, this year kind of illuminates that. So yeah, like, I'm not a huge Schneider fan at the best of times. And like that pick, if Haynes doesn't come good, I'm just thinking, like, are we going to get more of the same with these draft picks that just don't materialize into anything? So I've kind of got it in for Schneider a little bit. So perhaps that weighs worse with me when I see that than it may do with others.
I just think if you can't find a good solid, you don't have to find Steve Hutchinson. Just find offensive linemen who can gel together and put a serviceable line out there. It doesn't have to be top 5 offensive line or the worst in the league. There is, somebody will be ranked 16th in the league for offensive line play this year. Why can't Seattle have a few years of that? And they draft Bradford in round 4, and that we're not sure. And then A year later, they're drafting someone in his position in round 3, and now Bradford's winning that job, and you're thinking, well, what does that mean? And then they start moving Christian Haynes, Robbie, over to left guard, during this camp, and in the last game, he played a bit of left guard there, and he played a bit of right guard. You think, haven't we seen this with Damian Lewis? Like, why are you moving Haynes over again? It's a little bit worrying. It's almost like they don't really know what they're doing when trying to build an offensive line. Like, they've gone into the season hoping that Oluwatimi and Nick Harris are going to be enough at centre. And very, very quickly, they're having to go out there and get Connor Williams in. And we all hope that Connor Williams can be the Connor Williams that he was in Miami. But there wasn't exactly a whole bunch of teams knocking the door down to sign him. Let's not forget that. And he is coming off a serious injury, and he hasn't played in preseason or done that much in camp yet, or in preseason. So is he going to be ready for week 1? And if he isn't, we don't know what he's going to be. And it just looks to me a little bit, Robbie, like, again, you can ask serious questions about what they've actually done on this offensive line. And it's nice to think I've posited this in a positive sense on a recent stream, saying maybe Charles Cross takes a step, maybe Connor Williams gets back to his best and they sign him long term. Maybe Christian Haynes nails down the right guard spot, and maybe a combo of George Fant holding the fort until Abe Lucas come back, and maybe 3-4 spots on the offensive line can look somewhat tied down for the future. But the negative side of that is Charles Cross doesn't make a step forward and end up having spent a top 10 pick on a very average player. Connor Williams doesn't work out because it was a bit of a desperation late signing. That neither Anthony Bradford or Christian Haynes are the answer, or that neither of them really sort of excel beyond the other. I mean, look, the coach is still saying they haven't made a decision on who starts, which, if nothing else, suggests neither of them have blown anybody away. And George Fant is what he is, an aging veteran right tackle, but we don't know what's going to happen with Abe Lucas. He might not play again for all we know. So it's not a great situation, is it, Robbie? And when the GM says he thinks interior offensive linemen are overdrafted and overpaid, you think, well, what's the solution then? What is the solution to this? Because what you've done for a long time now hasn't worked.
I'm taking a little bit different approach. I don't think I'm as frustrated as maybe you guys seem to be over this. I mean, Anthony Bradford, when he came out, yeah, it was a 4th round pick, but he was a big, powerful dude. Like, I remember being pretty excited drafting him and him being a guy that was going to come in. We knew he wasn't like super like quick and anything like that, but he was a mauler, and we wanted someone who got on that line and just was pissed and would fight back against some of these big defensive linemen. And maybe he's figured it out. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he's taken a step forward. Sometimes these guys take a year or two before they, get it situated. And I remember, being super excited about Christian Haynes as well. So I'm not as worried about it. And it could be a scenario where maybe Haynes, like you said, needs a couple more weeks before he takes over the starting job as well. But I think I just want to see how it plays out, but I'm not overly concerned about it right now. Maybe it was just one of those things where Bradford just needed a few years before he was, or needed a season or two before he was like learn how to play in the NFL. I don't know. I'm not that worried about it. I do want some cohesiveness on the offensive line, and I want them to I want them to gel, and whatever the best 5 that they can put out there, that's what they're going to do, and hopefully everyone takes a step forward.
I'm not concerned about it, but I'm more leaning towards your view, Adam. I think there's a real challenge now for John Schneider as a GM to build an offensive line, because it feels like throughout they've kind of cobbled it together. The Okung pick didn't work out because he didn't sign a second contract. Okung might not have been a bust or a liability, but you don't draft someone 6th overall to have them for one contract and then sign somewhere else. And James Carpenter was a one contract player. Jermaine Ifedi was a one contract player. So the high picks haven't worked. Their free agent signings have often been on the cheap and have been crap. It's the one area where they've just had almost no success, haven't they? They've not had anything really. And then the other moves, like they move off Mark Glowinski and he goes and has quite a good career with the Colts for a bit. They move off Max Unger, and you could argue the Saints got the better end of that trade with the Jimmy Graham thing. So I think there's a pressure now. I think he's got to deliver an offensive line. I think he's got to, whether it means paying a bit more than he's comfortable for a player next off season, or whether it means going out and getting a Tyler Booker in round 1 and just going, do you know what, sod it, we're gonna sort this out. That's what I'd like to see them do, Adam. I think there is quite a bit of pressure now, and I think it is already a bad sign for me that Haynes has not won the job. I think they took him in round 3 with the idea that he would win that job, and I don't know if Anthony Bradford. I hope Anthony Bradford's going to be the answer, but I kind of feels a little bit like they've got, when you've got 2 right guards, you've kind of got none, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a mishmash for a while. I mean, how much money would you confidently predict on them picking up Charles Cross's option? I mean, they probably will. He's probably not going to be bad enough to not do that, but you wouldn't. I don't know how much money I'd put on them giving Charles Cross a second contract at this stage. Would you? Like all of it, like they've put a lot of resources into stuff that hasn't really reaped that much. I mean, Abe Lucas, if he can stay healthy, you could pretty much bank on him getting a new deal, but God knows what's going to happen with that knee. It just kind of feels like that might be a position where we're looking at the draft and free agency next year and thinking, God, we need 3 players on this line now.
I think if Cross has another year like the last 2, I think they probably would take the 5th-year option, but probably shouldn't. And I think they'd probably take it because I think it'd be a face-saving thing of, we don't want to be seen to have made a bad decision on that pick. But Cross so far has been exactly what some of us expected, which was the weaknesses and that he had at college have just translated to the pros, and he has to take a step forward now. I do trust Grubb and Huff to get that out of him, but to what extent? Is he going to become a really good player that can become you draft a tackle in the top 10, you want them to become your tackle for 8 years minimum, not 4 or 5, and then you're looking for that position again. So it's a big thing. Like in the same way that Devon Witherspoon can't be a 1 contract player. When you're picking that early, those players have to become not just good, but great players. Otherwise, it's highlighted that the pick was a mistake. So, yeah, this is a big year for Cross. Now, if he takes a big step forward and becomes, let's say, a top 6 to 8 tackle in the NFL, that could be a nice building block for the future. And if Williams can come good, then again, we'll be having nobody more than me will be delighted to say in week 4, wow, this offensive line's actually playing it's playing really well. I just think it is a slight concern and something that is worth monitoring alongside the quarterback position. Which, I don't want to. I guess we'll sort of finish where we started a little bit. It amazed me that someone's in the comment section like this. Somebody sent me a tweet yesterday in a reply to something that Robert Griffin III had said about Geno Smith, saying, "I can't believe there are people like at Rob Staten who he said that idiots like Rob Staten who want to get rid of Geno Smith." Like, at what point, guys, have I said this year I want to get rid of Geno Smith, or I want Sam Howell to start? So I've consistently said Geno Smith is the quarterback for this year. But for some reason, can you explain to me, Robbie and Adam, if you are not just all in on Geno Smith, if you are not saying he's a franchise quarterback, there needs to be no discussion other than he is absolutely fantastic. Why can't you talk about him in any other way other than that? Because to me, it should be a fascinating conversation that we have as Seahawks fans over the next few years. What is the future? Who is the next guy? How do you combine, transitioning from a bridge veteran, which is, it's fair to say Geno Smith is. He isn't Patrick Mahomes. Like, he's a bridge veteran who's in his mid-30s to whatever comes next. That's an interesting discussion. And also discussing the pros and cons of Geno. Because there are pros and there are some cons. There are some stats that really, speak very highly of Geno and really sort of portray him in a very positive light. There are also some statistics that do not shine a great light on Geno Smith. And I think it was a good article a few weeks ago highlighting that his 3 most significant seasons in his career have involved a season of mixed fortunes, where he's had like a good run of games and a bad run of games. Why can't we be mature enough to? Why do you have to pick a side on these issues? If you're either all in, or if you're not all in, you are therefore against somebody. Why does that keep happening in this fan base? Why is there not sort of like, it has to always be black and white, when more often than not, it's a massive grey area, as it is with this quarterback conversation.
I don't know if it's necessarily just our fan base, but it does feel that way sometimes, doesn't it? Like, it seems like a lot of times it goes that way, but it's also the same people who are saying that we're hoping the Seahawks lose just so we can be right. It's the same scenario, same people probably. It's dumb, it's silly. Like, I've never once heard anybody say on this podcast that we need to get rid of Geno right now. I think we've all said he's a bridge quarterback, and that's what we see him as. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having our own opinion on that.
Yeah, it's amazing that people, like I say, I'm often, Adam, portrayed on, like, when people need to. I often get the odd tweet where you hate Geno, you don't like Geno, you want to move on. Someone said the guy who sent me that tweet yesterday then corrected himself and said, "Oh, it's not that you don't like him; it's that you just wanted to draft a quarterback in the last 2 years." So what's the problem with that? Like, Geno Smith is, he is 34 this year. Like, what's wrong with drafting a quarterback? It wasn't, and I actually didn't argue that. I was not a big fan of JJ McCarthy or Bo Nix. I didn't think that the top 3 were going to last anywhere near Seattle. I thought Michael Penix was an interesting discussion, but then again, I thought there were pros and cons about Michael Penix. There was no banging the table to must draft a quarterback to replace Geno Smith ASAP. Yet it often seems that that's how you're portrayed, Adam, unless you are just all in, Geno's the best, Geno's franchise quarterback. How dare you say anything against Saint Geno? Like, unless you are doing this, you are then just immediately categorized as not liking the guy, not rating the guy. It's so stupid, Adam. It's childish. It's massively childish. And there is a childish element to this fan base, I'm afraid. We experienced it with the Jamal Adams situation. We experienced it with the Pete Carroll situation. And we're experiencing it now with the Geno Smith situation.
Yeah, I think childish is quite a good word to use, because when everyone watching this show, all of us sitting here will have at some point in our lives, maybe multiple, I'm sure I've done it many times, sort of started an argument that you don't actually believe, but you're enjoying the argument. So you just double, triple, quadruple down on it, and you just keep going and going and going. And it does feel a little bit like the fan base on both sides of the argument, which is a tiny minority, but they're the ones talking the loudest, are having entrenched their views on Geno. If you don't agree with these views, you are obviously adult. And as a result, I'm just going to double, triple, quadruple, whereby on one side, Geno is like the worst quarterback of all time. On the other side is like, Patrick Mahomes has got these stats, but have you seen some of Geno's stats? Because they're pretty interesting. And I just don't really get either side of it. And I do think that 85% of the fan base are actually stuck in the middle, or sat in the middle of it, very happily just minding our own business, waiting for the season, waiting for the draft to see what happens. But it does feel like one of those that it's almost taken on a cultish edge on both sides of the argument, which is a dangerous. It's sports. It's an unwelcome thing for people to be discussing, I think, because it does permeate quite nastily into a lot of the discourse. And I think we're getting to there from Geno. Like, Geno made like a throw from a collapsed pocket yesterday, which was like good. And it's like, have you? They say Geno can't do collapsed pockets. Have you seen this? Shut up, mate. Shut up. Like, we don't need either side of it. Can we just crack on? Because that's where I am.
Yeah, I agree. I think it kind of just takes the edge off supporting the team, doesn't it? You kind of want to enjoy moments like that. But you enjoy moments like that, and you immediately log on and to see people demanding that Geno gets a new contract, and you're like, "Oh my word!" And like, someone's just put this guy Ricardo in the comments now he's put there's a lot of Geno hate. I don't see it. I don't know if you guys see it. I don't personally see this mythical Geno Smith hate that people claim exists. I mean, like, people would suggest that I'm a Geno Smith hater. Just because I'm not writing articles saying they should sign him to a 5-year extension, we should crown him the quarterback, the franchise quarterback, and we should be talking about him in the same terms as Matt Hasselbeck and Russell Wilson. That it's nonsense. There is not an army of Geno Smith haters out there. There's probably a few people who may not even be Seahawks fans masquerading as Seahawks fans on the internet who are just talking absolute rubbish. But most people, as Adam says, are kind of just in the middle. We kind of think Geno Smith's probably not going to win the Seahawks a Super Bowl. Therefore, we're probably going to have to get one who can in the near future. But in the meantime, he's better than Sam Howell. He has to start. And while he's starting for the Seahawks, let's hope he plays well because we want to watch the Seahawks win. That to me feels like probably 75% of the fan base. And then you might have 5% who just go, get rid of him, get rid of him. And you might have 20% who are just in this kind of crazy little world whereby anybody who does not religiously praise the guy, and that's why it does feel like a bit of a cult sometimes, Adam, their response to people who do not align with their thinking is extremely redundant, childish, limited, and a bit pathetic, and taking the fun out of being a Seahawks fan, I have to say. And I always used to say when we were talking about Carroll, I have absolutely no problem with people saying defending Carroll or having the opinion that he should stay and stuff like that. But please allow us to have a different opinion, and not suggest that it's coming from any place other than passionate Seahawks fandom, which it is in this instance as well. Glenn, thank you very much for late super chat there. Much appreciated. Thank you for all of those super chats. Thank you to everyone who was watching this. A reminder that after every game, we will jump on and have a conversation in one form or another. Whether all three of us will be there or not will differ from week to week, but we will be there after every single game for the instant reaction live stream. We'll do live streams throughout the season during the week as well, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of those. It's ramping up in terms of videos being published and articles being published on the SeahawksChatBlog.com. So check out the website. Like I say, subscribe to the videos. Make sure you like the videos. Leave a comment as well. Even if you've commented in the live chat, it's always good to get the algorithm up by commenting in the comment section too. Robbie, Adam, thank you for joining us. And we're 2 weeks away from the first game of the season. We've got through the summer. We're there. We're back at the proper sports time now where everything's motoring along. It gets to September and everything's going again. And there's always something to watch on the telly. So that's good. We'll see you all next time. Thanks for watching. Until next time, bye for now.